All right. All right. Good morning, and welcome to the second UpSight demo for this year. We've been working on this as a team since midsummer, so awful lot of work. So today is kind of finishing, the work that we started out demonstrating a couple months ago, and so we've kind of finished the predict, interdict, and evict piece, and so that's kind of the central focus. And so we're going to do a little introduction. I guess that's me right now doing the introduction. We at UpSight, we fight AI with AI. So that's kind of our iconographic description of what we're about. And we use AI and we combat AI. So that's kind of our central thesis here. We're going to move on and kind of talk about, some of our ability to create native, new threat research using some infrastructure we've created over the last couple of months that we're calling the Detonation Lab. We're going to show you a lot of really exciting improvements to our console, and being able to show how we can visualize and explain what our AI is doing, and kind of show you what the threat actors are doing in hopefully a pretty intuitive way. And then we're going to kind of get to the really exciting thing to me, which is eviction. And the predict, interdict, evict, it all kind of goes together. And eviction is super key to really developing and delivering the value that UpSight Security has. And then we're going to do the main thing, which is we're going to do a live ransomware demo. So just kind of want to stress up front, this is not without risk, so hopefully we don't have a Cybertruck incident. This is real ransomware. It really is going to try to encrypt documents and extort money out of us. But that's not going to happen because we're going to be running UpSight. So that's the demo. And then, we're going to close with a little bit of roadmap, just kind of talking about where we're going to extend this from there. So the AI, the UpSight fights, is really, it's kind of this idea, really, if you will, that generative AI gives attackers a significant scaling advantage. So I've started talking to some of you about AI scale, and if you think about generative AI, it gives an attacker that kind of automation advantage that is pretty significant. And so this could be like basically, like deep fake, impersonating somebody as part of a phishing campaign, but it can also be more on the more technical and tactical level of, creating malware or attack campaigns that are unique and just kind of created at scale. And the point of predict, interdict, evict is as a strategy using our own AI, we give that AI scaling advantage right back to the defender. And so that's really what we're hoping to show you today. To kind of review what predict, interdict, and evict do, so kind of our core technology is based around the idea of taking attacker behavior, and you have to kind of understand that attacker behavior is way more than just malware, in kind of a classic sense of a singular application that does a bunch of things that are ultimately malicious. Real modern attack campaigns are stringed together through dozens of processes and doing lots of things. And so we look at that behavior as kind of a language, and we map that into a language domain, and we in fact have an AI model that is somewhere in the natural language processing family. And we're able to kind of start looking at that behavior and predicting the next move the attacker is going to make if they're sort of expressing the idea of, I am attacking you as an attacker. So it's a little bit like an autocomplete for attack. And when we see that happening, we interdict it. Basically, we stop that sentence, the attacker sentence mid-sentence, and then we evict, which is what we're showing today. And what that means is the entire sentence is erased. And that's a particularly powerful piece of our AI scaling defense. So at this point, we're going to kind of get into a couple other people talking here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Richmond, who's going to talk about our Detonation Lab. Go for it, Jerry.
Thank you, Tracy. So what is the Detonation Lab? Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the purpose of the Detonation Lab, the capabilities of it, and also how that's helped us. So I'll start by describing the Detonation Lab. The Detonation Lab is an environment where malicious attacks can be replayed for better understanding how the attacking software behaves. And this allows us to collect data during the attack that we can use later to analyze and to identify different characteristics to be able to predict uh, how the attack plays out. On this slide here, you'll notice a couple of pieces. On the right-hand side, there's our detonation, sort of the core of the detonation lab, our detonation VM. And there's a lovely tiger inside there. And so one of the things that I wanted to draw is an analogy. When I think about the detonation lab, I often think about a zoo. And it works on many different levels. One of the levels is I look at us as being observers when you go to the zoo and you're watching different animals and you get to see how they behave. And based off that, you can kind of learn some things about what they may or may not do. And the example follows, the analogy follows true with the detonation lab as well too. First thing, when you have a zoo, you want to create an environment where the animals can live. And so that's what the detonation VM is about. It's a place where we've created a target-rich environment for the attacking software to operate in. And in addition to that, we placed our UpSight client on that detonation VM, and we're using that to record and monitor what's happening so that we can use that information later to improve our product. One of the things that we want one of the things about the detonation VM that's important, we've installed a bunch of different software on it. So it looks like a real target. We've also allowed it to communicate externally through the internet. So as you can see, it can connect back to any command and control servers it may have. And we're doing that because we want to provide the most realistic environment possible to make sure the malware actually executes and runs and the attack is played out as it was intended. So that's one piece. And like any zoo, if you have just the environment, you don't have much of a show. So the other bit that we've got to put together are actual malware samples. And so that's one area where on the left-hand side, you can see in our UpSight cloud, we've written a number of different services. One of those services will go off and collect data, samples from various different public repositories and download those to our cloud storage. We have a couple of different methods of playing through those samples. Most notable is we get an alert whenever a new sample is downloaded, and our software that runs those will pick that up and queue it up and start running it in the detonation VM. We're also able to go through the entire catalog and replay, which is very useful for training the model. And so one of the things that's important to call out here is that we are able to scale this up. It's difficult to go through tens of thousands of samples quickly when you're doing them one at a time. So the detonation VMs are scalable and allow us to push forward and process samples rapidly. The UpSight client is running on the detonation VM. And probably the most important piece of this is that it's able to gather data about the attack and push it back to our cloud. That's where you can see the second oval there, UpSight Analytics. And that is a piece where we look at that information and data, and then based off that information and data, we make some decisions. This slide will kind of capture that. You can see here we have our deadly attack behind bars, and we take a look at that as the first step of the analysis. And the thing that we're determining here is basically whether or not we have kittens or tigers. And about 40% of the samples that we see are kittens. They're dormant. They're not doing anything at the moment. It's hard to believe, but sometimes malware doesn't run perfectly. And sometimes it's really smart. Sometimes it determines that, oh, this isn't a native environment and I'm not going to do anything. So that's one of the pieces there where we have a first layer that filters out the things that we're not really interested in. So about 60% are actual attacks. We turn around and we analyze those a little bit further. And there's a couple of byproducts that come out of this. One are attack words, and the other is attack sentences. And so going back to what Tracy was talking about, we're sort of building a vocabulary based off this. We can identify new techniques and new ways to trigger techniques, and from that improve our ability to understand basic components that feed into our natural language model. And then based off that, we can build out sentences that accurately describe the attack. And then of course, all that feeds back in. And so we sort of have a feedback loop where we're able to continuously improve over time. One of the things I want to call out here, great appreciation working with Freddie. He's done an amazing job of helping us build out attack words, and I'm really grateful for all the help in the last couple of months. Just wanted to make sure and give a tip of the cap to Freddie. The other bit is we actually have some live samples. And so I'm excited now to turn it over to Mackenzie, who's going to be able to show you a few of those samples.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Let me just share my screen here. Get that set up. Move the Zoom window out of the way. Alrighty, yes, my name is Mackenzie, and as Jerry mentioned, I'm going to show you guys a few different samples, a visualization of the event graphs of different detonated malware samples that Jerry has got running in our detonation lab over the past couple months. For those of you who joined us for our last demo a few months ago, you'll remember then we showed kind of an early stage look at what our event graph visualization looked like. We've gone through several iterations since then. We're proud to kind of talk you through some of the improvements that we've been making. Obviously, much more to do, but we're proud of what we've accomplished over the past couple months. And I want to structure this by focusing on three main goals that we have for our event graph visualization. The first of which is to give our users, typically a threat researcher, a complete and yet digestible understanding of the entire attack chain. So once again, calling back to that early stage view of our event graph from a few months ago, it was very cluttered. There was a lot of information, and yet at the same time, it wasn't really explaining or conveying, what was the actual attack looking like? What was the general shape of the attack? So I want to highlight a few changes we've made since then. First off, you can see that the event nodes themselves have been drastically simplified. We're really just getting the crucial bits of information for us to look at the high-level view and understand, what was the general shape of this attack. So we've got just our initiating process file name, as well as an icon to really illustrate, what was the type of operation? Was it a file modification, a process operation? Was it dropping a reg key? Things like that. So we can kind of get that general sense from a quick look. We can also understand what the UpSight client did in response to these events. So you'll notice the 4 green nodes on the left. These are all events that the UpSight client witnessed and allowed to happen. The orange node on the right with the deny symbol was an event that the UpSight client saw and blocked. And the final red node with the X symbol was an event that the UpSight client blocked and then terminated the initiating process. So we can kind of quickly see, we got some events, the general type of the event, who was doing the event, and what the UpSight client did in response. But all of that alone really isn't enough to help understand the attack. And so that's where the final piece of information that perhaps by now you've noticed comes in, which is that we're actually annotating each of these event nodes with the attack word that we saw, or that the UpSight client determined each event was performing, right? So if we look at these in turn, on the left here, these nodes, these first 2 nodes are pretty common for most of our malware detonation samples. This has to do with how the detonation lab is bootstrapping the malware and actually getting it running. So we'll ignore those for now. But if we look at these 4, you can see on the left, we're doing some DLL search order hijacking. So perhaps some privilege escalation or some other technique over here to get going, followed by a registry run key attack word, so some form of persistence. And then finally, we're scraping some credentials from web browsers and then scraping LSAS's memory. So we can tell based on these last 2 nodes that this malware was most likely some form of credential theft malware that was trying to scrape our user creds from the machine. So from a high level view, we can quickly understand, all right, what was this attack doing, the types of events, and what was the actual techniques it was using, and we can characterize this malware from a really quick view and understand what was going on. Of course, that's just the kind of first step. We're probably going to want to dig into each of these nodes in turn and understand more about them. And to do so, we can simply click on a node, get zoomed in, and get a whole lot more information on the right here about what was happening with this event. And we'll dig into that in a few moments. But the second goal that I want to focus on that we have for our event graph visualization is to display the causal relationships between events. So the majority of cybersecurity software that has some form of event graph visualization typically is really just showing a process tree, right? The parent to child relationships between different processes, usually the main initiating process of the attack or that was detected. That's not quite what we're doing here, right? We can show, nodes that are related in that way, but we can also zoom out and see nodes that are related, perhaps across process tree boundaries. Nodes that have dropped files or reg keys that have later been spawned into other processes. Different evasion techniques that malware will use to get around that typical paradigm of the process tree. We collect all of that, and the UpSight client is actually kind of linking those events together as causally related on the endpoint in real time. So on the right here, you'll see these three nodes all have the same initiating process name. If we take a look at their PIDs, 3852, we'll see that they're the same for all of these events. These are all the same process, right, that we've linked these events together. This process here is doing some kind of file modification, right? We don't have the information here, but it may or may not be the parent process. But even if it weren't, we'd still be able to capture that information and display it on the same graph to give our users a more complete view of what was going on, all the different disparate, different techniques the attack was using. We can show it all on the same graph. Of course, it's not just post-fact that we can show these things. It's happening in real time, and that means that our predictive AI model can see it too. So I'm going to jump over to a different graph to talk about our third main goal with our event graph visualization, which is to actually illustrate our predictive AI model's decision making, right? It's one thing for AI model to be running and making smart decisions on the endpoint, but if we can't understand that later and get confidence in what it's doing, we've still got a problem. And so we're trying to illustrate through our event graph visualization, specifically what the model was seeing at the time and why it made the decisions it did. So this is a slightly similar graph. You'll see we end in a terminated node for credentials from web browsers. So once again, a cred theft malware. We have a slightly different persistence technique here. We've got a scheduled task being set up, so another type of persistence. But I'm going to draw your attention to this reg runs keys attack word node here. Just to kind of dig in a little bit more. You can see on the right, along with a lot of different information, we have a number of tags that are associated here in these orange labels on the right. We'll focus on these top ones, which are labeled the process attack graph. These are actually attack words that we have associated with the running process itself, not specifically this event, not the operation happening here, but the process itself. And these could either have been added based on prior actions that the process performed, or it could have inherited these attack words from prior causal links that happened by other processes that we've kind of carried over as a history. So we can understand, all of the different attack words that might be associated with this process. And again, we can see it here, but also the model is seeing this because this is information that we have in real time on the event as we are trying to predict, what might happen next. So, a useful thing just in our UI, I want to point out that we can mouse over any of these and get, not only the TID of the technique, but also a short blurb about it and what attack phases it's from. And if I go over here, I can click, we have a handy link that'll bring us right over to the MITRE attack framework page so we can get more information about that attack technique right from our UI. But moving on, if I scroll down, we can see going back to our AI model, we can see that we have this predicted attack word section. This is still very much a work in progress, but essentially what we're trying to illustrate here is at the time that the UpSight client saw this event, what was the model thinking? What was the model perhaps expecting to see next? And I want to draw your attention to one in particular, this T1555.003, that it's predicting with about 61% probability, right? If I jump over to the next node in the chain here, we can see that it's been tagged with the credentials from web browsers. If I mouse over that, you can see that its technique ID is that T1555.003. So the model actually was expecting perhaps to see this attack word featured in the chain. And if we scroll up to the top, we can see the description here. We actually get confirmation that this was terminated by UpSight's predictive AI model. So that prediction fed into the decision to terminate this future node. So this is just one of the few things that we're doing at the moment to try and illustrate exactly what did the AI model see at each step along the attack in real time, and how did that feed into the decision-making process that it made. So that, along with our efforts to display kind of a digestible and complete view of the whole attack chain, as well as display the causal relationships between the events, those are kind of our main goals that we've been working on the past few months. I'll leave you with just a couple more graphs just to kind of illustrate a few more. Again, these are all real malware samples that we have detonated in our detonation lab in the zoo that Jerry talked about earlier. Here's another cred theft example. This time I just want to point out, you can see that we've captured a number of scheduled tasks that it set up along the way, more persistence techniques. These are all things that we saw. And in a few minutes, you'll see that what we can do about these now that we know that they exist. And then finally, one more graph, slightly different here. You can see a couple different attack words. We've got a dynamic link library injection, right? So this was perhaps doing some form of evasion techniques or privilege escalation. And then finally, we've got a data encrypted for impact. So this is actually encrypting data on the endpoint. So some form of ransomware, most likely, that we caught and blocked. So yeah, once again, this is kind of the first two parts of the equation, right? We can show what we've been predicting as we witnessed an attack. We can show that we've interdicted in our blocks, in our evicts. But the last missing piece, of course, is eviction. And for that, I'll turn it back over to Tracy, who can talk to us about the progress we've made there. So thank you, Tracy. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Mackenzie. So that's kind of the exciting news on the prediction and interdiction side. So eviction, to us, we really believe this is key. And the little quote I have generated here, blocking stuff's easy. Stopping the attacks where it counts. And this is kind of the difference between where a traditional endpoint security product kind of stops and where we really just kind of begin is if you just terminate the end of one of those chains that Mackenzie was showing, you miss a lot of the things that happened before that are still part of the attack. So attackers usually have a couple of goals. First off is they want to gain persistence, and they might want to have some sort of backdoor where they can regain entry into an environment. And that is really the difference between blocking and evicting, is that we're not just taking the most obvious symptom of the attack, we're actually rooting out and curing the disease that is the attack. And that's what eviction is really about. And we do this in an automated fashion as well. And so, just kind of run through a lot of the benefits we see around eviction, is the first and the most obvious to us, it stops the attack at the point of initial access. This actually happens on the endpoint where, the attacker has briefly gained control over the machine. And, this is a huge cost saver over time. So I'm citing some IBM numbers. I mean, you can find things. I happen to use IBM ones because they are pretty consistent. So they were estimating an average cost of a breach, at about $4.3 million. So that's a pretty big business impact to anybody. And if you can stop the attack before it has moved laterally, that's a significant savings right there. So being able to do that, that is the goal. Eviction, as I said, it's really focused on solving the entire root cause of the attack. So, we're going to remove persistence and backdoors. This is a big thing a lot of incident response engagements end up being involved in, is kind of trying to find all the different ways the attackers re-entering the environment. If you've ever dealt with or played with Cobalt Strike, it's kind of almost a magic show. It's just like stuff's everywhere, a lot of indirection and misdirection. And, this can be quite difficult. But because we're based around this language model, we have these, graphs of behavior, we can actually walk back and we can kind of follow all the little branches and root out the attacker quite effectively. And further, this is a real-time response. So, we're not needing to go off and think about this for 10 to 15 minutes. And I think this is going to become really important in that, if you go back a couple of years, you might see attackers taking weeks, months even maybe, before they actually deployed their ransomware payload or whatever it is that they were trying to do. And, they were kind of slow rolling it. We've certainly seen a lot of evidence that that's dropped from weeks to hours, and it wouldn't surprise me if we start to see minutes. So you don't really want people having control over your environment for really any amount of time. And so having that real-time response is really important to limiting your risk there. And the automation piece of the eviction, this kind of gets into that AI scale defense, is that, you're going to start seeing more and more attacks because attackers have this automation advantage. And, kind of a block everything and quarantining everything, kind of, general response to every incident in itself will start to become very business impacting. So in a sense, we're trying to say, we're solving true positive alert fatigue. These are real attacks, and we're going to take care of the vast majority of that through this automated response capability that, is what eviction is. It's autonomous, this is kind of just another way of saying, well, it happens in real time on the endpoint. But it really takes a lot of load off security staff, allows them to deal with far more complex things that might be going on in the environment. And so that's why we say eviction is key to AI scale defense against AI scale attacks. So let's look at that a little more, kind of going back to a graph example here. So one little addition to these graphs is we have these little reverse arrows on them. And so that's how in our graph we represent eviction. So if you look over here on the right, the attackers denied the credentials, and that's kind of like the leading edge of the attack. It's the most obvious thing. You could write a static rule that says, don't allow credential access, and it's an important thing. But what that static rule would miss was that the fact that there is a whole chain of persistence over here as well. So not only do we terminate the process trying to steal credentials, we also go back and we terminate its persistence. We basically remove its ability to come back. And this particular sample without eviction, if we run it long enough, it will actually start repeating, because the scheduled task that's over here just keeps running. And so with eviction, we're actually able to remove the scheduled task, and so we kind of take out its ability to come back. And further, we block access to all the file artifacts that the attacker is using as part of that attack. All right, now to the main event. So we kind of carrying on our cat theme for today, we have a collection of really valuable business data in the form of cat photos. And this is, again, this is real ransomware. It's definitely going to try to extort money out of us. And so anyway, we'll hope for not a Cybertruck incident, but we're pretty confident it's going to work. So anyway, I'm going to turn this over to Will, who's going to run us through that.
Hello, and thank you, Tracy. This is going to be a fun demo because I get to run some live ransomware and show you how UpSight deals with interdiction and eviction. Go to the next slide. So the ransomware that we are using here is a well-known ransomware, but we have repackaged it using the sort of techniques that would be very easy to do with generative AI. So we can see the virus total results here after the repackaging, and we can see that the detection rate is fairly low. So this is the sort of thing where UpSight can come in and be helpful. Let's go next slide. So this is what happens with this ransomware if we run it and we do not stop it. We can see we get this scary message with the threat of data extortion. And we need to contact the authors to pay up to get rid of it. With that said, let me share my screen and show you how we deal with this. Okay, I'm on my virtual machine here, and I have the threat sitting on the desktop here. It came from the internet. I unpacked it from this 7-zip file here. And I also have these business critical cat photos. So this is the sort of content that would be very costly to our business if we had encrypted and we needed to recover. I'm going to go ahead and run the threat here and let UpSight take care of the rest. While this is running, we'll watch for some post notifications in the bottom corner here showing that UpSight has detected and terminated the threat. And we can see we detected some sensitive file activity. And the next post notification shows that we've terminated it. And simple as that, let's go ahead and check our cat photos quickly. We can see that they are not encrypted. We can still see them. I am going to show you from a different execution the threat graph for what this threat looks like. This ties together a lot of components from what Mackenzie was showing. we can see the initial zip file when we were unpacking it had mark of the web. So let's go ahead and see if we have isolated this so that we can't unpack it again. I'm going to go ahead and open it with 7-zip. Access is denied, so that means that UpSight has walked back this chain and has isolated that file in place. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next node. We can see that this threat has placed a registry run key as a persistence technique. I'm actually gonna skip showing you this key because I know the threat actually fails to set that key. We're showing it as evicted because that key no longer exists. And if it did, we would have removed it. It does successfully place a key in the user's run directory though. So I'm gonna go ahead. I have the registry editor open and I will refresh the view. And we can see that that key does not exist. The value of brrr.exe is deleted. Go to the next node. We can see that it also placed in the startup folders some files. Oh, let me also show you, because the target it set, it dropped a new file in app data roaming. If I go to the file explorer, actually open this up, we can see the file is still there. But if we run it, we should see that access is denied and UpSight has, because of the causality of the placement of that file, it is isolated in place. Let us see the next node. We have a startup folder here in the user's directory, in the app data directory. That should be this one right here. We can see it dropped this file. If we run it, it is access denied. We have evicted that by isolating it as well. Let's check the last one is going to be in the program data directory for another startup entry. And this one probably failed due to access denied based on the permissions of the folder. And then let's check for final nodes. That is all that it did for persistence techniques, as well as dropping files. Oh, and let me go and do one last thing and run the initial threat one more time and see if we've actually blocked that as well. So you can see UpSight has painlessly and automatically evicted all components of this threat. And the machine is secure and we still have our data. So I will turn this back to Tracy.
So I hope you're really impressed with that. You know, it's kind of a long walk for a short demo, but that's pretty much the point. I mean, that's what AI scale defense will do for you. You know, predict, interdict, evict just happens. You know, so we did not pay a ransom, and we took care of a fairly complicated set of persistence techniques that might have taken a little bit of time to deal with otherwise. And no one had to work a Sunday or Saturday trying to figure out how the backup was working. We still have our cat photos. So I'm really excited about this. It's actually been a very long walk. We've been working on this for about 2 years, and it's just super exciting to see this come together, and there it is. I'm gonna turn things over to Slavi, who's gonna kind of talk about where we go from here.
Hey guys, I am Slavi, I'm the CTO, and I'm super pumped. Those kittens were saved. And as Tracy said, that was a short demo, but long walk. And I just want to reinforce one more time, think about how much time and effort and money eviction is going to save for the businesses out there that get attacked. As we said there, stopping attacks, it's not easy, but a lot of products out there doing it. But eviction at the scale that we can do and just putting the business back on track, wow. So I want to talk about where we're going to take the feature next. So it's great. You saw in the UI the little back arrows. There was actually a question from Joe. Thank you for asking. And that signifies that we've evicted a file or a resource, a registry key, et cetera. But we are thinking that maybe we should visualize this more a little bit in the UI, and we're going to show evict inventory so the users can actually, admins can go into the console and actually take a look of what we have evicted from the attack. And in the unlikely cases where we have falses, they can do undo on the undo and maybe re-evict. So that's going to be also driven very much by our design partners, because we want to actually want to hear where do you want us to take this feature. Next slide, Tracy. Also, the UI console, it's a constant and never-ending improvement, but we're going to introduce some dashboards so you can actually see, you can have a like easy view of the security posture of the enterprise. And we're also going to add some event search. Again, feedback from design partners is going to be key for us to where to take the console for the console development to make it really user-friendly and so on and so forth. Next slide. So thanks to the awesome work that the team put together, and again, shout out to our director of threat research, Freddie, for developing the rules that do the attack word annotation for ransomware. We have a pretty good coverage of standard ransomware samples that encrypt the data for on the enterprise. But the attack landscape is shifting. Ransomware actors, they decided that they can actually do less and get the same amount of money. And right now, a lot of ransomware samples are just exfiltrating data and extorting customers by saying that they're going to sell the data on the black market. Company secrets are going to be exposed, so on and so forth. So obviously, we have to protect against that. So we have to build some new capabilities into our agent, and we're excited actually to do that and then fully close the circle on the ransomware prevention. And next, you also saw the great work that we've done with the detonation lab. But we think we can do more. As Jerry said, this lab is scalable. And we're thinking of opening a public detonation API. So kind of bring your own malware to work sort of thing. Well, not work, but detonation. So bring your malware, we'll detonate it for you, analyze it automatically because UpSight client is going to be running, and show you the attack graph, and you can play with it. And that's it. You know, we are thinking that this is going to be a feature that probably is going to span from next quarter, from this quarter to the next one and the one after that. So look forward for Q2 of 2024. And I believe that is all for me. Back to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Slavi. So I guess I kind of want to leave this on our request to you, which is, you know, I hope you're really excited about what we're doing here. And you know, at this point, what we really need most as a business and a technology is, you know, your expertise and opinions. You know, like, you know, how would this work in your organization? And you know, that could just be as simple as a conversation, or you know, becoming a full-on design partner, and you know, kind of starting to roll this out and use it. And you know, we want to learn from how that works. So you know, if you are or have a client or know of somebody, you know, that you think would be really interested in, you know, looking at what Predict, Interdict, and Evict can do for them, up to about 1,000 Windows 10 or 11 endpoints. You know, Mac is coming. You know, that's probably in that next year roadmap for sure. But for now, we're talking Windows. Anyway, that's pretty much what we had for you today. So let me quickly stop our recording, and I'm hoping we got questions.